So, you want to take off from airfields other than the default and desert airfield. Today I will be covering how to place new runways around the planet and how to import custom airfield models that you can use in place of the two default airfield models. As usual, this video is broken into chapters with the following timestamps on screen. First, you'll need to find a location to place your airfield. I recommend finding a relatively flat spot so the runway can be flush with the ground, but if you cannot find a spot like this, you can try to find a nearby body of water and place the airfield there instead. Once you land at or fly low over the area, note the latitude and longitude and the altitude of the terrain. Go back to the editor and then open the area data file using the file path on the screen. You can also access this location by using the Windows R shortcut on the screen. Keep in mind that you do not need to close the game during this process. If the area data file is not present here, you can copy it from the game's Steam directory. Inside the file, copy one of the existing airfield data structures and paste it below the two existing ones. Change its ID to that of the last existing one plus 1. It is important that airfield IDs are sequential and only increment by 1 for each airfield, otherwise the airfield will not load. Next, change the name of the airfield to your liking. In the latitude and longitude fields, the values you enter will need to be equal to the values you recorded earlier plus 90 degrees. The reason for this is that the code reading the coordinates is using a different coordinate system based on a zenith angle of 0 at the South Pole, and the azimuth angle of 0 is just offset by 90 degrees to the west from 0 longitude in-game. In the altitude field, add 18 to 25 meters to the altitude you obtained earlier so the airfield isn't under the terrain. Next, we'll look at rotating the airfield so it points towards a desired heading. The rotation fields do not use roll, pitch, and yaw angles, but instead use a quaternion format for the rotational position of the airfield. Because of this, it is not intuitive to change the values without doing some math beforehand, but luckily, one of our community members, Thick, has made a calculator to help with this. Check the description for the link. First, we need the runway's longitude as specified inside the file. Change the alpha value to the heading you want the runway to point towards. Next, replace the second and fourth rotation values in the rotation field with the Y and W values shown on line 5 and 6 in the calculator. You can also input these values into the start point object so the aircraft itself is rotated towards the correct direction. Note that you can return to the game and select the airfield from the editor and launch from it. Check that the airfield is roughly where you want it and that the altitude is correct. Adjust these parameters as needed. After spawning the aircraft and the runway should be facing the correct direction, but it is likely that the aircraft isn't near the runway and the runway isn't exactly positioned over the exact coordinates that you chose earlier. I recommend setting the runway's position field values to 0 to move the runway to the correct coordinates. However, the aircraft's start position will still be offset. To fix this, you'll need to adjust the X and Z values of the start position field. The Y value adjusts vertical position, so it is generally not something you need to change. While adjusting the aircraft's start position, you will likely notice that the X and Z directions are not defined as being relative to the runway's current orientation. Because of this, finding the correct X and Z values is usually an iterative process. final parameter you can change for your airfield is the start time, which will change the time of day you spawn at. Spawn on the runway and change the time by holding the F10 or F11 key until you reach your desired time of day, which is displayed in the upper left. In the start time calculator, we will again need the file longitude from earlier as well as the time of day obtained just now. In the time fields, input the hours, minutes, and seconds of the start time. In the area data file, create a new field exactly as you see on screen. This can be placed in any order in the area's data structure among the other variables. Enter the value obtained from the calculator. You can also have an airfield set up to spawn you at a random location on the planet every time you launch. To do this, I recommend placing an extra decimal point in a field such as latitude or longitude. When you do this, the syntax of the data structure is not readable by the game, so it just puts you in a random spot. Keep in mind that it will always spawn you at 15 kilometers altitude. Your spawn location will also change every time you revert flight. It is also possible to use custom airfield models in place of the two default ones. First, you'll need to add the airfield model to the game's mods directory, and more specifically inside the World Objects folder. Make sure the folder is unzipped. Be sure that the airfield mod contains its respective object file, materials file, and texture files. Next, add the appropriate data structure into the area data file as you would for a regular airfield. Depending on the mod, the author may include an additional object inside the data structure to handle any emissive elements of the airfield, such as runway lights. Before I end the video, I wanted to give a quick status update. So for those who don't know, I started grad school this fall, so I've had a lot less free time to work on the series, which is why it took 4 months to put out this 9-minute video. I'm still going to be working on the tutorial videos, the next of which will be the first part of the wing tutorial, which will be 2 separate videos since there's going to be a lot to cover. With that in mind, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.